I've got a few news for you. First one, you're a Jedi. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Second one, you just heard a few clones whispering about some Order 66 behind your back. In this video, we're diving deep into the most game-changing moment in Star Wars by imagining you just a regular Jedi trying to survive this nightmare. And trust me, it's going to be a really interesting experience. So grab a snack, subscribe to the channel, and let the galaxy fade around you. So, you're a Jedi, huh? The galaxy's so-called peacekeepers. But here's the thing. Being a Jedi wasn't exactly the dream job you'd imagine. Sure, people might think you're these noble heroes, but honestly, life for a Jedi was pretty rough. First off, Jedi life means saying goodbye to almost everything that makes life fun or normal. You grow up in the Jedi Temple, basically a giant monastery/training camp. No family and real friends outside your fellow Jedi. You're raised with the strictest rules imaginable. No attachments, love, personal possessions. You'd think all that dedication would come with some perks, but nope. Jedi are always on the go, sent on missions across the galaxy, often to dangerous places. Your life is basically a non-stop grind, training, meditating, fighting, and keeping the peace. But peace in the galaxy? That's a joke. There are always battles brewing somewhere, always some angry separatists or criminals trying to stir up trouble. So your peacekeeping often ends up being full-on combat, dodging blaster bolts, or pulling people out of fires. And here's a little secret. Jedi aren't exactly loved by everyone. Sure, the Republic government supports you, but most ordinary folks don't really get what you're about. Some see you as mysterious, distant, or even frightening. Others think you're political pawns or power-hungry zealots. Ever had someone cross the street to avoid you because of your robes and lightsaber? That was probably normal for a Jedi. Plus the Jedi Council? They're basically your bosses. The Council is super strict, very traditional, and kind of stuck in their ways. They expect absolute obedience, and any hint of emotional struggle or doubt gets you looked at sideways. So if you had any personal problems or wanted to question orders, tough luck. You had to keep it all bottled up or risk being called weak. Speaking of emotions, suppressing feelings is a Jedi's bread and butter. Love, anger, fear, all dangerous distractions that could lead to the dark side, they say. But that just means Jedi constantly wrestle with loneliness and frustration. Imagine hiding your feelings for years, pretending everything is fine, just to avoid being kicked out or worse. It's like walking on a tightrope, always afraid you'll slip and fall into darkness. And yeah, some Jedi really believed in their mission, and that's admirable. But even the best of them were dealing with burnout and stress. It's hard to keep calm and balanced when your life is basically a war zone, when friends and allies get killed around you, when you barely have time to catch your breath. Now let's talk about the training itself. Jedi younglings start training as kids, and it's intense. Physical combat, deep meditation, learning the Force, mastering diplomacy, it's a lot to handle. And failure isn't really an option. Jedi Padawans get assigned to a master who's supposed to teach and guide them, but some masters were just not great teachers. Imagine being stuck with a grumpy mentor who barely pays attention and expects you to be perfect anyway. Oh, and the lightsaber. Yeah, it looks cool, but it's a beast to master. One wrong move and you're either slicing yourself or accidentally hitting your partner during training. Not to mention the pressure of having to build your own lightsaber crystal and all that Jedi tradition stuff. It's like a rite of passage, but also a headache. So with all that in mind, Jedi life was already a grind, stressful and isolating. You were walking around with a target on your back. Political enemies hated you. Criminals feared you. And sometimes even your own government was suspicious. And to top it all off, you couldn't really trust anyone outside the Order, since the galaxy was full of spies and traitors. Honestly, it makes you wonder. How would you deal with all that? Could you keep your cool, keep following the rules, and stay loyal when everything around you was falling apart? Or would you start doubting the Jedi Code and the people who are supposed to have your back? Anyway, this is just the beginning. The Jedi already had a tough life, but what was coming next? Well, that would make surviving even harder. So, now that you're settling into this Jedi life that's already draining, things are about to get a whole lot worse. Because as a Jedi, you're not just dealing with boring training and emotional bottling, you're standing right in the middle of a galaxy on the edge of chaos. The Clone Wars are raging, and every day means risking your life in battles you didn't really sign up for. But what makes this worse is how little control you actually have. You might think the Jedi are these big commanders calling the shots, but most of the time, you're just following orders from the Republic, who's basically a political mess. You get sent to war zones, forced to act like generals, and expected to lead armies of clones who, fun fact, don't exactly think for themselves. You might be wondering, how did the Jedi not see this coming? How could they not sense that something was seriously off? Well, Jedi were trained to avoid emotional attachments and to trust the Force. But what they didn't realize was that the Force itself was being manipulated, clouded by something darker and deeper than they'd ever faced. It's like trying to find your way through a fog that you can't see through, but that fog is everywhere, messing with your instincts and your judgment. You're expected to keep calm and carry on, even as the galaxy's turning upside down. You can't exactly run away or take a sick day when planets are burning, when friends are dying, or when the Republic's political leaders are playing dangerous games behind your back. You're caught in the middle, like a pawn on a chessboard you didn't even agree to be part of. You start to feel this weight crushing you, like the whole order is on the brink of collapse, but nobody's ready to admit it. You get little signs here and there, suspicious looks, secret meetings you're not invited to, strange behavior from some of your fellow Jedi. But what can you do? You're supposed to trust the Council, trust the Republic, and trust the clones you lead. That trust is about to be broken in a way that will leave you wondering if you ever really knew what was going on. Imagine how it feels when the people you thought were allies suddenly turn into enemies overnight. It's a gut punch you don't see coming. And for the Jedi, that moment came in the form of Order 66, a command that turned clones against their Jedi commanders without hesitation. Can you picture that? 1 minute, your comrades in arms, the next, your targets. And don't forget, you're not only fighting for your life, but also for the survival of the Jedi Order itself. But with everyone turning on you and nowhere safe to run, surviving becomes a game of luck, quick thinking, and maybe a little bit of the Force's mercy. Though mercy was a rare visitor those days. So yeah, Jedi life was miserable before, but after Order 66, it was like falling off a cliff and hoping the Force would catch you. Spoiler, it often didn't. Let's be honest, you never really looked at Palpatine twice. You've seen him on Holocron broadcasts, sat through his speeches in the Senate, nodded politely during meetings with the Jedi Council. He seems calm, collected, and above all, trustworthy. At least that's what you tell yourself. You never really questioned him, did you? Not seriously, not enough to dig deeper or to raise your hand during those council sessions and say, hey, should we maybe look into what Palpatine is really up to? Because let's be honest, questioning Palpatine was like questioning the sun. It just doesn't happen, at least not openly, especially not when the galaxy is at war and everything feels like it's hanging by a thread. From your perspective, Palpatine was the steady hand in a storm, the guy keeping the Republic together, while separatists blew up planets and clones marched into battle. You figured, if anyone knew how to handle this mess, it was him. The Jedi Council might have been a little skeptical, but even they kept things on the down low, not wanting to rock the boat too hard while chaos raged everywhere. Then there's Anakin, your buddy, or at least someone you worked with, who had this complicated relationship with the Chancellor. You saw it firsthand. Anakin trusted Palpatine in a way that made even the most loyal Jedi blink. Secret meetings, whispered conversations, weird looks that didn't quite fit the Jedi mold. And you might have thought, well, Anakin's a bit intense and Palpatine knows how to manipulate that, but you didn't think it would lead anywhere dangerous. It was just politics, right? Meanwhile, Palpatine was quietly stacking power, using the war as the perfect excuse to grab more control. Emergency powers, more soldiers, tighter restrictions, and you barely batted an eye because, well, that's what leaders do in wartime, right? But deep down, you probably felt a flicker of unease. A meeting here that didn't add up, a decision that seemed off, a strange look from the Council or Yoda when Palpatine's name came up. You felt it, even if you couldn't put your finger on it. You might have brushed it off because questioning the Chancellor meant risking your career, your mission, maybe even your life. And then there was Mace Windu. That guy never trusted politicians. He was wary, suspicious, ready to call Palpatine out at the first sign of trouble. But even Mace was careful. The Jedi Order didn't want to start a civil war inside the Republic, and openly accusing the Chancellor was a dangerous game. So, instead, there were secret investigations, quiet surveillance, and tense meetings behind closed doors. In a way, the Jedi were trapped between a rock and a hard place. They knew something was wrong, but didn't have enough proof, and the longer they waited, the more Palpatine tightened his grip. The war was draining everyone, and the Jedi were stretched thin, torn between fighting droids on the front lines and navigating a political minefield back home. Now, imagine being in your shoes, balancing this impossible job, fighting a galaxy-wide war, following orders, and keeping your faith in the Force and the Republic. You trusted the system, trusted the leaders, but trust is a tricky thing, isn't it? Especially when it blinds you. Palpatine used that trust like a Jedi uses the Force, quietly, invisibly, but with incredible power. He was patient, playing the long game, and by the time anyone realized what was happening, it was already too late. Have you ever had a moment where you trusted someone completely, only to realize later they weren't who you thought they were? That gut punch, that feeling of being blindsided. That's what the Jedi felt when everything unraveled, except they couldn't just walk away or shrug it off. Their entire order, their lives, everything they stood for was on the line. So here's a question for you. Looking back, do you think the Jedi should have questioned Palpatine more? Or were they just too caught up in the chaos to see the truth? Would you have had the guts to challenge the Chancellor, or would you have played it safe, hoping for the best? Because that hesitation, that trust, that failure to question, that's one of the big reasons why surviving Order 66 was basically impossible. The Jedi were blindsided by the very man who held the galaxy's strings, and by the time the truth hit, the game was already over. And then it happened. The infamous Order 66, the command that turned your closest allies into your deadliest enemies. One moment you're leading your troops, and the next, those same soldiers are firing on you without hesitation. Imagine that shock, that confusion. You trained together, fought side by side, shared victories and losses, and now they're aiming their blasters at you. It's hard to put into words how that kind of betrayal hits you. You want to shout, to reason with them, to remind them who you are, but it's useless. The clones were programmed to obey, and that programming wiped away any hesitation. You're facing a force you can't fight, a trap you didn't even see coming. And what about Anakin, the guy who was supposed to have your back, who you counted on to help you through this? Instead, he's standing there, conflicted, but ultimately choosing Palpatine over you. Watching him make that choice is like losing a part of yourself, and you can't help but wonder what could have been if things had gone differently. You scramble, you dodge, you fight with every ounce of strength, but the odds are stacked against you. The clones know your moves before you make them. They anticipate your attacks, and the entire system seems rigged to wipe you out. It's like trying to swim upstream against a tidal wave. And somewhere in the chaos, you catch a glimpse of Master Windu confronting Palpatine, the two of them locked in a fierce duel of light and dark. You know what's at stake, but you're powerless to stop the fall. When Anakin intervenes, siding with the Chancellor, that's the moment the Jedi's fate is sealed. It's brutal, it's heartbreaking, and it's painfully human. You thought you were prepared for war, but nothing could prepare you for this level of betrayal. Makes you think, how much can you really trust the people around you when everything can change in an instant? So yeah, the Jedi didn't survive because they were weak, or because they didn't fight hard enough. They didn't survive because they never questioned the man who held the galaxy's fate in his hands. And when the moment came, they were blindsided by the very person they trusted most. That's the reality of Order 66. And as much as it hurts, it's a lesson we can still learn from today about trust, power, and the danger of never asking the hard questions. So let's pause for a moment and imagine the Jedi Temple just before everything went wrong, the great sanctuary on Coruscant, a place filled with echoes of lightsaber training, quiet meditation halls, and the laughter of younglings. This was the heart of the Jedi Order, a place where new generations of Jedi were born, trained, and prepared for a lifetime of protecting peace in a chaotic galaxy. If there was anywhere safe, you thought it was here. But when Order 66 hit, that illusion of safety was ripped away in an instant. The temple, a symbol of hope and learning, suddenly turned into a scene of chaos and bloodshed. And no one, not even the youngest Jedi in training, was spared. You'd think the clones, the soldiers, who'd marched by your side through countless battles, would hesitate before turning their blasters on younglings, right? Well, no, they didn't. Order 66 was absolute and ruthless. Every Jedi was a target, from the oldest masters down to the youngest trainees. Those younglings, who dreamed of becoming heroes like Yoda or Obi Wan, had no chance to defend themselves. The clones fired without question, without mercy. Imagine what it felt like, being in the temple corridors, hearing the thunder of blaster fire, echoing where you learned your first Force lessons, where you built friendships and bonds that you thought were unbreakable. You'd see kids running, scared and confused, desperately trying to hide. But the clones were everywhere. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. It's hard to imagine the horror. Those kids had spent years under the guidance of Jedi Masters, learning to be brave, to protect the innocent, to embody hope. Now they faced betrayal in its purest form. And you, watching this unfold, would feel the crushing weight of helplessness, knowing that even if you wanted to protect them, you were already fighting a losing battle. And while this was happening, the Jedi Council was racing against time. Masters like Yoda and Obi Wan scrambled to understand the full extent of the betrayal, but even their legendary wisdom and skills were stretched thin. Yoda, who'd trained Jedi for centuries, must have felt the deepest kind of pain watching his young students become targets. Obi Wan, who'd been there since the Clone Wars began, understood that this was more than a battle. It was the end of an era. You can almost picture it. The desperation in their eyes as they tried to regroup, trying to protect whoever they could, but always one step behind the unfolding tragedy. The temple's grand halls were no longer a place of learning, but a battlefield. And the innocent, the younglings, paid the highest price. It makes you think, doesn't it, about the depth of this betrayal. How could the Order be caught so off guard? How could the very soldiers bred to protect them become their executioners? And what kind of galaxy are you living in where children aren't safe, not even in the sanctity of the Jedi Temple? There's a gut-wrenching unfairness here, one that sticks with you. The younglings weren't just collateral damage, they were the future, snuffed out before it could even begin. Alright, so imagine this. Order 66 drops like a bomb, the galaxy flips upside down, and you're suddenly the most wanted person in the entire universe. Hide. Yeah, hiding sounds like the obvious choice, right? Find a quiet corner, lay low, wait for the chaos to blow over, maybe even binge some holovid series while you're at it. But spoiler, hiding wasn't exactly a winning strategy. Think about it. You're a Jedi, trained to be calm, focused, and composed under pressure. But now you're feeling something that's pretty much the opposite. Panic, desperation, and a kind of cold sweat that just won't quit. You dash through corridors of the temple that moments ago were filled with laughter and hope, now echoing with blaster fire and betrayal. You duck into a shadowy alcove, hoping that this time the clones won't find you. But they always find you. And it's not like you can just disappear into thin air. The galaxy's biggest military machine is after you. Clone troopers, with orders hard-coded into their very DNA, scouring every planet, every building, every nook and cranny. No matter how good you are with the Force, no matter how fast you move, the odds are stacked against you. You might think, good, the Force is on my side. I can sense danger, I can hide my presence. And yeah, that helped sometimes. But remember, the clones weren't ordinary soldiers. They had access to technology, scanners, and secret intel that made hiding more like playing a game where the house always wins. Even the famous Jedi like Obi Wan Kenobi found themselves on the run, hopping from one dusty planet to another, living in caves, deserts, and less than ideal hiding spots. The freedom fighter lifestyle wasn't glamorous or easy, and forget about any vacation plans. You weren't just hiding your lightsaber, you were hiding your entire identity, constantly looking over your shoulder, never sure if the next step would be your last. And that's a pretty heavy weight to carry. Imagine the mental strain of pretending you're just some random person while knowing that anyone who recognizes you could end your run in a heartbeat. You had to suppress everything that made you you. The Force, your Jedi teachings, your connections to the Order. You're alone, stripped of your purpose, and it's terrifying. On top of that, hiding wasn't only about avoiding clones, it was about avoiding the entire galaxy's new reality, one where the Jedi were labeled traitors, hunted as criminals. Planets you once called home were now hostile territory. Old friends might have turned their backs. The political landscape was shifting under your feet, and you had no idea who to trust. It's almost ironic, isn't it? You trained your whole life to be a guardian of peace, and now the best strategy you could come up with was hiding and hoping nobody notices you. Not exactly the heroic image you signed up for, but the real kicker is, hiding only brought you time, not safety. The clones were everywhere, the purge was thorough, and the galaxy was a much scarier place than you ever imagined. Sooner or later, most Jedi were caught, and when they were, it was often brutal and sudden. So here's something to think about. If you were in that situation, what would your hiding spot be? A remote forest moon, a crowded city on the outer rim, or maybe a cozy little hut on some forgotten planet? And how long do you think you'd last before the clones showed up knocking? Hiding might seem smart, but in the grand scheme of Order 66, it was a desperate gamble, one that didn't pay off for most Jedi. Take Ashoka Tano's story, for instance. She was once a bright, energetic Padawan, thrown into exile when the Order turned its back on her. She had to abandon everything: friends, training, her place in the Order, and live in the shadows. She learned quickly that hiding meant constant vigilance, cutting ties, and living with the loneliness of isolation. Even for someone as strong and resourceful as her, surviving meant sacrifices nobody talks about. You too would have to master the art of invisibility, not the magical kind, but the kind where you erase yourself from everyone's memories, where your identity is nothing but a ghost. You'd avoid holonet broadcasts, skip markets, even change your voice. And it's not just the clones who make survival tricky. After Order 66, the whole political landscape flipped. The Republic you knew disappeared, replaced by the Empire's iron grip. Jedi were branded criminals, hunted relentlessly, and sympathy was scarce. Those who used to respect you might be too afraid to help. Fear spread faster than a pod racer on Boonta Eve, and that fear makes people do surprising things. Imagine landing on a planet hoping to rest, and instead finding an Empire checkpoint, clones scanning for any sign of Jedi presence. One wrong move and it's all over. Or worse, landing somewhere seemingly safe, only to be betrayed by someone you thought was an ally. Trust became the rarest commodity in the galaxy. You'd have to become a master of disguise and deception, hiding your Force sensitivity as if it were a deadly secret. The Force, once a source of strength and pride, turns into a liability. You'd have to suppress it, keep your emotions buried, or risk detection. The pressure of pretending to be normal while your whole life is built on the Force, that's a heavy burden. Even great Jedi like Yoda weren't exempt. Picture the legendary Grand Master retreating to a swamp on Dagobah, a muddy, isolated, mosquito-infested swamp, hiding his immense power, waiting out the dark times. That's not exactly the heroic life you envisioned when you first took up the lightsaber, right? But it was necessary. Survival meant sacrifice. Then there's Obi Wan Kenobi, who went even further, disappearing into the deserts of Tatooine, watching over Luke from the shadows. His life became a quiet vigil, blending into the landscape, living among moisture farmers, far removed from the glory and battles of the Clone Wars. That kind of hiding isn't about bravado, it's about endurance. And what about the rest of you? The countless Jedi scattered across the galaxy, many never seen again, swallowed by the vastness or captured in brutal confrontations. Some died on the spot, others vanished into legend. Most couldn't just snap their fingers and escape. Survival was a messy, desperate struggle every single day. Hiding also takes its toll mentally and emotionally. You lose contact with your fellow Jedi, your mentors, your friends. The Order you knew slowly fades into memories. The isolation gnaws at your spirit. Doubt creeps in. Was it worth it? Are you truly surviving or just existing? Every moment in the shadows chips away at your hope. And let's be honest, hiding isn't glamorous. No secret lairs with fancy gadgets or cloakrooms. Often, it's cramped caves, abandoned buildings, or crowded slums. So, if you were in that situation, what would you choose? Go underground like Yoda and Obi Wan, waiting for the right moment to strike. Or maybe try to rally others, start a rebellion. Or perhaps you'd vanish entirely, living a quiet, hidden life, hoping the galaxy forgets your name. Each choice comes with its own dangers, risks, and heartbreak. And even with the best hiding spots, the best plans, the best luck, surviving Order 66 wasn't guaranteed. The galaxy was turning against you, and the shadow of the Empire stretched wide and deep. It's no surprise that hiding was only a temporary solution, and many Jedi didn't last long. So, what's your take? If you were forced into hiding, could you handle the loneliness, the fear, and the constant threat? Or would you prefer to stand and fight, even if it meant certain death? Let me know. So, Here you are, wondering how many of your friends survived. What about the Jedi Council and that promising hero, Anakin Skywalker, who ended up rewriting history in a way nobody saw coming? Picture yourself standing in the council chambers, the carved columns of Coruscant's Temple, listening as masters debate the war's next move. You'd feel the weight of centuries of tradition, a sense that these were the galaxy's wisest guardians, untouchable by politics or war. And then, in a nightmare twist, one by one, they vanished. You remember how he lit up every mission with his intensity, how the council tolerated his outbursts, because, let's face it, they believed he was the one destined to bring balance to the Force. From your vantage point, watching him command troops on Geonosis and rescue Senator Amidala, you never suspected he'd be the hand that toppled the temple. But Palpatine exploited Anakin's fears. Fear for Padme, fear of failure. And in the days leading up to Order 66, you might have noticed Anakin pulling away. He was distracted, tense, his once familiar grin replaced by a haunted look. That chink in his armor was all Palpatine needed. When Order 66 hit, you'd probably have heard the whispers of General Skywalker leading clones into the temple. Imagine the disbelief, your trusted ally marching through the silent halls, raising his saber at fellow Jedi. It's a betrayal that cuts the deepest. Because Anakin wasn't just any Jedi, he was the one you believed could unite both sides of the Clone Wars, the one who gave you hope. And yet, in a single moment, he became the reason the Order fell. Now, let's shift to the council members you looked up to. Mace Windu, dignified and steady, always at the heart of high-level strategy. From where you stood, he was the man who could stare down the darkest Sith and win. Yet, in his final moments, he was trapped in Palpatine's office, lightsaber clashing with the Chancellor's hidden power, and you can almost feel the despair echo through the council chambers when that duel erupted. Windu's fall wasn't just a tactical loss, it was the signal that the Order had lost its spine. Then there's Ki-Adi-Mundi, the soft-spoken but brilliant tactician. You might have supported him in Senate hearings, admired his calm logic, but on Megiddo, mid-mission, he was cut down by clones who once mirrored his commands. From your vantage, seeing one of the wisest council voices silenced so abruptly would feel like the entire Order's foundations cracking. Aayla Secura, her appearance on Felucia was a beacon of hope. You'd watched the Holonews celebrate her victories, yet there she was, caught in the colony's underbrush, blaster bolts tearing through her robes. Instinctively, you would have reached for the Force to warn her, but you'd feel it slip away before you could blink. And let's not forget Plo Koon, that stoic figure whose control of the Force was legendary. His starfighter downing over Cato Neimoidia, the flashing debris across the sky, that image would haunt you, proof that even the masters of space and Force fell prey to the purge. From your perspective, watching the council reduced to rumours and overturned chairs, the fear would be suffocating. You'd pace the temple corridors, half expecting to hear the gavel of a hollow Senate session call you back to order, only to realise there was no order anymore. The leadership you trusted turned to ghosts. So here you stand, wondering if any of these legends survived. The answer? A few did, slipping away like whispers in the Force. Yoda exiled on Dagobah, Obi Wan hiding as a hermit on Tatooine, but most of those you looked up to are gone. You'd feel that ache of loss, asking yourself if you'd have had the courage to follow them into exile, to live a hidden life, or if you'd have fallen in battle, casualty of trust misplaced. What would you have done, watching your mentors fall one by one? Would you have confronted Anakin in that hall, tried to reach the friend you knew? Or would you have slipped away, your faith in the council shattered, your hope for the Order dying with them? So, yeah, Anakin survived, but as Darth Vader, the galaxy's new nightmare. The Jedi Council mostly fell, but a few lived on in exile, waiting for their moment. So, you're out there somewhere on the edge of the galaxy, still breathing, still alive. You might think the worst is behind you, but there's a storm coming that you don't see yet. That storm has a name, the Inquisitors. You probably haven't heard about them yet, or maybe just whispers, stories passed around in the quiet corners of the galaxy where people like you hide. The Inquisitors are a new kind of threat, created by the Empire to hunt down anyone like you, survivors, Jedi who escaped the Purge. They're not just soldiers or bounty hunters. These people were chosen, trained, and sent out with one clear goal: to find and eliminate every last Jedi hiding in the shadows. These hunters were trained to track down survivors like you, armed with knowledge about Jedi ways and empowered by the dark side of the Force. Some of them had once walked the Jedi path themselves, but had turned away. They understood your tactics, your mindset, and that made them even deadlier. Living in hiding became a constant game of cat and mouse. You had to move quickly, change your identity, and keep your powers hidden. Trust was scarce because anyone could be an informant or spy. You probably found yourself questioning everything, always wondering if the next face you see is an enemy or someone you can trust. It was a lonely existence, and the pressure to stay alive was exhausting. The Empire controlled nearly every system, and the Inquisitors spread like a shadow across the galaxy, closing in on those who refused to vanish. Have you ever thought about how that kind of fear changes you? How it makes you doubt your own strength and the choices you made? So while the galaxy around you was falling into the Empire's hands, you were left to figure out how to keep going, how to disappear in plain sight, and how to live with the knowledge that powerful enemies are searching for you. From your point of view, the Inquisitors are like this dark cloud stalking every corner of the galaxy. Imagine you're already doing your best to keep a low profile, suppressing your Force abilities, maybe even changing your appearance. Then suddenly, you have to worry about these trained killers who know the Jedi arts, who can sense your presence in the Force, and who have a license to kill with terrifying efficiency. Here's the thing, the Inquisitors weren't Sith Lords. The Sith stayed few, mainly Palpatine and Darth Vader, because the rule of two was still in effect. Instead, the Inquisitors were Force-sensitive agents, recruited or coerced by the Empire to hunt down Jedi survivors. Some were former Jedi themselves, who'd either lost faith, been captured, or turned to the dark side. Others were Force-sensitive individuals, trained from scratch to be ruthless Jedi hunters. Imagine the psychological pressure if you were a Jedi in hiding, knowing that your pursuer used to be one of your own. It's like being chased by a shadow of what you once were, and they know every trick in the book because they learned it themselves. The Empire weaponized this, making the hunt intensely personal and efficient. You'd hear stories about the Grand Inquisitor, once a Jedi Temple guard, who became the leader of this dark order of hunters. He had a knack for ferreting out hidden Jedi, and with his spinning lightsaber and cold precision, he was a nightmare come to life. From your vantage point, hearing his name would send a chill down your spine, because he wasn't just powerful, he was relentless. Then there's the second sister, the fifth brother, the eighth brother. All these Inquisitors whose names might sound like something from a sci-fi thriller, but to a Jedi survivor, they were very real and very dangerous. They hunted across star systems, tracking down any Jedi who dared to show themselves or slip up. The Inquisitors didn't just attack with brute force either. They used fear as a weapon, sending messages to surviving Jedi that resistance was futile and escape impossible. Their presence meant hiding spots quickly became death traps. You'd think a remote asteroid or a dense jungle moon was safe, until suddenly you hear rumors of an Inquisitor's arrival. From your perspective, the Inquisitors changed the rules of survival completely. Before, you might have hoped the clones were your biggest threat, but after Order 66, those clones were mostly replaced or supplemented by Imperial forces and Inquisitors who could track Jedi with a kind of predatory skill that made hiding feel like a ticking time bomb. Even Jedi who'd once been great warriors found themselves outmatched. The Inquisitors knew how to exploit Force weaknesses and weren't above using traps, deception, or sheer intimidation. And for Jedi who lived through the initial purge, the nightmare wasn't over. It had just entered a new, darker phase. You might wonder, could you have outsmarted them? Maybe, but the odds were stacked against you in ways that make most survival stories look like fairy tales. The galaxy was shrinking, your allies fewer, and your enemies more relentless. The Inquisitors were the Empire's way of closing every door, hunting you like a ghost. Now, here's a little humor to lighten things up. Imagine trying to sneak around with an Inquisitor on your tail, and suddenly they catch you because you tripped over a rock. Talk about bad luck, right? But in reality, every small mistake could cost you dearly. From your point of view, the rise of the Inquisitors was the final nail in the coffin for most Jedi survivors. The fear of being hunted by someone who once shared your values, but now sought your death, was enough to break anyone. In the middle of all this was Darth Vader, the Emperor's enforcer, a figure of fear and power. Vader was relentless in his hunt for Jedi survivors, using all his skills and knowledge to track down anyone who dared resist the New Order. If you had to face him, the odds were grim. Vader was a soldier, a force of nature, with a personal mission. His loyalty to the Emperor was absolute. Just one of his breaths can send goosebumps crawling down your spine, and right now, you're somewhere in exile, trying to stay hidden from him. The galaxy's changed overnight, and you're no longer safe walking openly in the streets or relying on anyone to watch your back. You're part of a dwindling group, Jedi scattered and hunted, shadows slipping through the cracks of a ruthless empire. And Vader? He's the nightmare stalking your every move. You try to stay quiet, blending into the crowds, but the problem is the Empire's reach has stretched everywhere. No planet is truly safe, no settlement truly hidden. You hear about new Inquisitors arriving, hunting the Jedi, with methods that feel colder, crueler, almost surgical. They are the Emperor's sharp tools, but Vader is the storm at the center, the one who turns every rumor into fear. When he steps into a system, everyone feels the shift, the air thickens, and the people hold their breath, waiting for the inevitable to fall, like a shadow. It's almost ironic to think the man beneath the mask was once a Jedi, someone who fought alongside you, who believed in the light and the Force as a path to peace. But something inside him broke during the war, and now that brokenness fuels his obsession. He knows your strengths, your weaknesses, even the tiniest habits that give you away, because once he shared those same traits. That knowledge makes him terrifyingly effective. You wonder sometimes if he even recognizes you, or if you're just another name on his list. And yet, despite all his power, Vader is a hunter who doesn't rush. You notice the patience in his pursuit. It's not about quick kills or flashy battles. It's about tracking, waiting, watching you unravel in the shadows until you make a mistake. Every Jedi who's caught off guard, every misstep that costs a life, only feeds that hunger. It feels like a game to him, and you're on the losing side. Your life is reduced to whispers and furtive glances. You don't speak about your location, you don't make calls, and you certainly don't trust easily. When a message comes through, you weigh every word, every pause, because you know Vader's network is vast, and his spies are everywhere. One slip, one careless act, and it could be your last. You sometimes wonder if the fear he spreads is more powerful than his lightsaber, and if survival is really just a matter of outlasting the shadow of his presence. Still, in the quiet moments between running and hiding, you remember what it was like before all this, when the Jedi Order was whole, when you could believe in a future beyond endless war and death. Now, those memories feel distant, like fragments of a dream slipping away as Vader's shadow grows longer. He's no longer just a former Jedi turned Sith. He's become the embodiment of what the galaxy fears most, the relentless force pushing the Jedi to the brink of extinction. Every place you once thought safe, every friend you once trusted, has become a potential trap. You find yourself questioning even your own instincts, wondering if paranoia is now part of survival. You hear stories of Jedi who tried to resist, who took the fight back to the Empire, but their defiance only made them targets. Vader doesn't tolerate rebellion, especially from those he once called allies. The hunt is personal, and his fury is cold and unyielding. At times, you ask yourself if there's any hope left, or if the Jedi will simply become ghosts, stories told to children on distant worlds. But giving up isn't an option, not yet. So you move through the darkness, a flicker of light that refuses to die, even as Vader's breath echoes in the silence behind you. You hold on to the Force, to the lessons and the hope it gave you, even if survival means walking a razor's edge every day. You can't help but wonder what drives him so deeply. The pain, betrayal, loss. Maybe he hunts the Jedi because he sees pieces of himself in you all. Or maybe it's something darker, something buried beneath the mask and armor. Whatever it is, it fuels a pursuit that won't end until there's no one left to run. And that's your reality now. Always on alert, always running, with the chilling sound of Vader's breath somewhere in the galaxy, reminding you that your past is your enemy and your future uncertain. You can almost feel the weight of the armor as Vader moves through the galaxy, a relentless force of nature on a mission. Every step he takes is measured, purposeful, like he's carrying more than just metal and machines. There's a storm raging inside him, quiet but fierce, pulling him forward. Vader moves with a purpose, sharpened by pain and loss, his obsession rooted in more than duty. You get the sense he's driven by the need to control the chaos that overtook his life. Every Jedi he finds is a piece of the past he wants to erase, or maybe to reclaim in some twisted way. It's hard to say if he's punishing them for what happened, or punishing himself through them. You wonder how it must feel to wield that power, the dark side coursing through his veins, the strength to crush anything in his path, but still carry the weight of mistakes that haunt you like ghosts. What do you think is harder, fighting external enemies or battling the storm inside your own mind? When Vader hunts, he's patient, almost methodical. He studies his prey, waiting for the perfect moment, the slightest weakness. There's no rush because this is more than a mission. It's a test of his will, a way to prove that he's in control of the pain and anger that could otherwise swallow him whole. But every encounter brings back memories, faces from a past life, voices calling out in the Force, echoes of friendships and betrayals. Sometimes the fight must feel like a conversation with himself, a dark echo chamber where victory isn't just about survival, but about silencing the doubts and fears that claw beneath the surface. You might ask yourself if that makes him stronger, or if it slowly chips away at what's left of the man inside the machine. Despite the armor, despite the power, Vader's journey is one of constant struggle. Each Jedi hunted is a reminder of what he's lost and what he's become. Yet beneath it all, there's a relentless drive, something fierce and almost desperate, a need to finish what was started, to bring an end to the chaos that swallowed his life. And as he moves through the galaxy, breathing heavy and steady, you realize that his hunt is as much about survival as it is about redemption, though neither is easy to grasp or find. You imagine him standing alone in the dark, the hum of his lightsaber piercing the silence, the mask hiding whatever flickers of emotion remain. Does he ever stop to think about the people he's chasing? Does he wonder about the Jedi who escaped, the ones still hiding, living in fear? Maybe a part of him respects their resilience, or maybe it only fuels the obsession further. When you think about it, Vader's life as a hunter is a lonely one. He's cut off from the people he once cared about, from the ideals he once fought for. His only companions are the echoes of the past and the dark side whispering in his ear. And yet, despite the isolation, he pushes forward. The galaxy may have changed, but his purpose hasn't wavered. At first glance, it might seem like being Darth Vader is all power and glory. After all, you wield the dark side of the Force, have an army under your command, and strike fear into the hearts of millions. But the truth, it's a torturous existence, one that would break almost anyone who isn't prepared. The life of Vader is a constant battle, not just against enemies, but against the suit, the pain, and the crushing weight of regret. First off, the suit itself is a technological marvel, but also a cage. It keeps you alive after the terrible injuries that nearly killed you on Mustafar. Your burned flesh, shattered bones, and destroyed lungs all need the life support the suit provides. But it's suffocating. Every breath is mechanical, every movement a calculated effort against the heavy armor. Imagine wearing a metal shell, weighing you down at every step, pressing against your skin. Except your skin is damaged beyond repair. Your body screams for relief, but there is none. And then there's the constant pain. Vader's body is ravaged, nerve endings raw, and the suit's systems can only mask so much. The Sith Lord is a prisoner of his own existence, forced to endure agony while maintaining an aura of terrifying strength. The agony isn't just physical. There's the emotional torment too, the crushing weight of lost family, of a past full of mistakes, and the bitter anger that fuels his connection to the dark side. Now, if you think the Force makes everything easier, think again. The Force is a tool, powerful, yes, but demanding. Using it drains energy, focus, and patience. Vader relies on it to move faster, strike harder, even breathe better. But overuse can leave you vulnerable. Without the Force, you're just a heavily armored man, struggling to move. And without the Force, enemies would see your true weakness, a broken body barely held together by technology. Let's talk about daily survival. While on the surface, Vader commands fleets and leads deadly missions. The behind-the-scenes reality is grim. The suit's life support systems need constant maintenance, something only the best Imperial technicians can handle. Without repairs, systems fail. A breach in the armor means death. A failing respirator means suffocation. Each day is a test of endurance, balancing the fragile technology that sustains you with the endless demands of your dark purpose. Food, water, sleep, all these basic human needs become complicated. The suit makes eating almost impossible in the traditional sense. Vader survives on specialized medical nourishment, often administered through the helmet or tubes. Sleep is another story. Vader's body can't rest as normal humans do. His dreams are haunted by memories and dark visions, interrupted by pain and the constant hum of machinery. But beyond the physical and mental strain lies a deeper truth. Vader is a symbol, a legend, a terrifying enforcer of the Empire's will. His mask is his face, his voice a mechanical growl. No one sees the man beneath, the conflicted soul, the former Jedi who once was Anakin Skywalker. And in this isolation, Vader's loneliness becomes a silent enemy, gnawing at his sanity. Would you last a day in this existence? Could you bear the endless suffering for the sake of power and revenge? The Sith path is not one of glory, but sacrifice. Sacrifice of self, of humanity, and often of hope. Darth Vader's story is a cautionary tale wrapped in black armor, a reminder that behind every legend lies a human burden heavier than any lightsaber. So as you take your first steps in his shoes, feel the weight of that armor. Hear the steady mechanical breath that keeps you alive, but reminds you how close you are to the edge. This is not just survival. It's a battle, every moment, fought with pain, power, and an unyielding will. And this is only the beginning. Now that we've stepped into the shoes of a Jedi after Order 66, felt the loneliness, and seen the shadow Darth Vader casts, let's turn to Obi Wan Kenobi. How did he spend his days once the Jedi Order was gone? After leaving Anakin burning on Mustafar, Obi-Wan's life took a sharp turn, from the chaos of war to the silence of exile, and that silence weighs heavy. You find yourself on the dusty plains of Tatooine, a harsh desert world far from the bustling centres of the galaxy, a place chosen by necessity rather than choice. Your only mission is to watch over the infant Luke Skywalker, hidden from the Empire's gaze, but that mission carries more burden than any battle you ever fought. Every morning you rise before the suns, slipping through dim alleys of Anchorhead or skirting the moisture farms, your hood drawn low, boots crunching in the sand. You go by Ben now, a name you barely recognise, but it's vital to the disguise you wear as tightly as you wear your robes. The Force feels distant here, like a river slowed to a trickle, and you're constantly reaching for the current that once guided your every step. You remember how the Force sang beneath your skin, how it whispered in your ear, but now it's more like faint echoes in a cavern of doubt. Sometimes you close your eyes and stretch out with the Force anyway, hoping for even the slightest touch of its warmth, only to find pain and fragments instead. Mustafar's fiery roar, Anakin's anguished cry, the burning halls of the Jedi Temple echoing in your mind like a ghost. Your cave home sits hidden among spindly rocks, miles from the Lars homestead, but you keep a watchful eye on their simple farm. In the early days you almost reached out, tried to speak to Beru or Owen, but you held back, reminding yourself that attachments bring danger. You tell yourself it's selfish to get close, that your silence is the best way to protect Luke, but the loneliness bites deeper with every passing sunrise. You spend your days repairing broken droids and scavenging for parts, letting grease stain your fingers so you won't feel the ache in your chest. The wind outside rattles the cave entrance, and you imagine it's the voices of a galaxy long lost calling you back. When traders arrive once a month, you venture into Anchorhead, trading skills for credits and listening for whispers of Imperial patrols. The locals treat you as a hermit, maybe an eccentric farmer, but you never let curiosity become conversation. You hardly speak, and when you do, your voice is quiet, measured, like you're still calibrating the simple act of communication. It surprises you sometimes how much you've forgotten, how to joke, how to laugh, how to offer comfort. All you know is the vigilance that pulses through your veins, the constant question. Is it safe to help? Is it safe to move? Is it safe to care? Ironically, Luke's laughter drifts across the dunes in that carefree way only a child can muster, and it both soothes and torments you, You watch him from a distance, chasing moisture vaporators or racing womp rats in his imagination, and you feel that stubborn ember of hope flare to life. You wonder if he senses your presence, if the Force still binds you together across that stretch of dry land. You want to reach out, to guide him, to show him the paths he may one day walk, but you dare not. Owen's simple warning echoes in your mind: stay away from the boy. Yet some mornings, when the twin suns rise in fiery tandem, you hesitate at the edge of the farm and catch your breath, your heart pounding at the thought of stepping closer. You tell yourself the child needs a guardian, even an unseen one, but duty demands distance. So you pull the hood down, steel your resolve, and slip back into the sands, leaving the laughter behind. Nightfall brings its own challenges. The desert sky is vast and silent, and the stars look as they always did, but to you they sparkle with memories. You lie on a simple cot carved from stone, your breath shallow as the voices whisper again. Qui-Gon's calm guidance, Anakin's eager plans, Padme's gentle reassurances. You reach for them through the Force, but your grasp finds nothing but emptiness. The cloak of exile feels heavier at night, pressing down until sleep is a distant dream. Occasionally, you hear rumors of other Jedi survivors, faint signals in the Force, or hushed rumors in cantinas, but you avoid the temptation. Each story of resilience feels like salt in your wounds. You should be part of that fight. You should be helping. You should be more than a watcher. But you know you can't risk revealing yourself. The Empire's spies lurk everywhere, and one careless act could doom the boy you're sworn to protect. Days bleed into nights, and the desert doesn't care about the wars or the losses that haunt you. The Force feels distant, elusive, like it's slipping through your fingers, and when you try to reach for it, it pushes back, cold and sharp. Meditation doesn't bring peace anymore. Instead, it stirs the ashes of failure and loss. You think of Anakin, not the hero he was meant to be, but the monster he became, and you carry that weight like a chain around your soul. Do you blame yourself? You might. Do you hate him? Sometimes. But underneath it all is a complicated knot of sorrow and longing, tangled too tightly to unravel. The desert is full of dangers, but the worst threats aren't the sandstorms or the wild creatures. They're the Inquisitors, the Emperor's hunters, scouring the galaxy for remnants of the Jedi. You hear whispers of their cruelty, of how they hunt with ruthless precision, and you know one day they might come here, to your silent corner of the universe. You prepare, sharpening your senses, tuning your reflexes, even if your body feels heavy and worn. When the moment comes, you'll have to be ready. You remember your days in the Jedi Temple, the training halls, the laughter of younglings, the stern yet kind gaze of Master Yoda, and the steady calm of Qui-Gon. Those memories are both a balm and a blade, comforting and cruel. Sometimes you dream of the past, imagining a different path, a chance to change the outcome. But dreams are dangerous in this place. They can bring hope, yes, but also despair when you wake and see the harsh sun streaming through the cave entrance. So you keep moving, keep watching, keep waiting for the day when you can step out of the shadows, when the boy will be ready, when the galaxy might need Obi Wan Kenobi once more. And until then, you carry the weight of silence with steady breath and steady heart, a quiet guardian in a quiet world. The days on Tatooine all looked the same until the message came. Bail Organa's voice cracked through the silence you had learned to live inside, pleading, not as a senator, but as a father. Leia, taken from Alderaan, vanished into a criminal underworld, and the only person he trusted to bring her back was you. After all these years, after the Jedi were gone, after you'd sworn to stay hidden, Bail was asking you to pick up the pieces of the man you used to be and put him back together. You wanted to say no. You almost did. Luke was here, Leia was far, and the Empire was watching everything. You weren't even sure if you could fight anymore. The lightsaber was buried deep, not just beneath the sand, but under years of doubt and guilt. But something in Bail's voice stuck with you. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the reminder that Padme's child was in danger. Or maybe you were just tired of waiting. So you left the desert behind, boarded a freighter with barely any credits and more rust than shielding, and headed to Daiyu. If you've never been there, imagine a city that never sleeps. But not in the fun way. It's neon lights, blaring noise, smells you can't identify, and people who'd rob you blind with a smile. You land, already feeling like a relic. Everyone moves too fast, talks too loud. You try to ask questions, but people brush past you like you're invisible. You can't feel the Force the way you used to, and without it, you're just a man with a beard and a past nobody wants to hear about. Tracking Leia wasn't easy. The trail led through fake Jedi cons, spice dealers, bounty hunters with way too much confidence, and rooftops you had no business jumping across at your age. At one point, you took a hit that knocked the wind out of you, and for a second you really thought, yeah, this was a mistake. Funny how chasing a 10-year-old across a crime-ridden city reminded you that you're not 25 anymore. When you finally found her, she didn't exactly make it easy. Leia Organa was smart, sharp, and completely uninterested in taking orders from some old man she'd never heard of. She didn't trust you, didn't care that you once sat on the Jedi Council, didn't care that you fought in the Clone Wars. She just wanted to go home. And honestly, who could blame her? The mission only got worse from there. You couldn't use the Force, too risky. And even when you tried, it felt like trying to lift a mountain with your thoughts. You were rusty, slower, second-guessing everything. You didn't feel like a Jedi, not really, more like someone pretending to be one, hoping no one noticed, and the galaxy wasn't going to wait for you to catch up. The Inquisitors arrived faster than expected. You'd heard rumors, of course, about Jedi hunters trained by Vader himself, twisted Force users loyal to the Empire, brutal and relentless. But seeing them in person was something else. They walked like predators, moved like they owned the streets, and they were hunting someone. You. One of them, Reva, was especially dangerous. Sharp, driven, and obsessed. You didn't know how much she knew about your past, but it was enough to make every step through Daiyu feel like walking a wire. You and Leia kept moving, weaving through dark alleys and back doors, hitching rides on cargo ships, running from patrols. She asked questions constantly, about the Jedi, about the galaxy, about you. She was bold, clever, and way too curious for her own good. Somewhere in the chaos, you started to care. Maybe because she reminded you of Padme, or maybe because it had been so long since someone looked at you like you were more than a ghost. Either way, it started to matter. And then it happened. You felt something in the Force, a presence, cold and familiar. You hadn't sensed it in years, hadn't even allowed yourself to wonder if it still existed. But there it was, distant but burning like fire through ice. Anakin, alive. The moment hit you like a punch to the gut. You'd spent a decade thinking you'd left him behind on Mustafar. Now the truth, that he had survived, twisted into Vader, shattered the fragile wall you'd built around yourself. You didn't tell Leia, of course. How could you explain that the man hunting you was once your closest friend? That the monster haunting the galaxy was someone you'd raised, fought beside, trusted? You barely understood it yourself. But something shifted in you after that. The fear didn't vanish, but it changed. It sharpened. And beneath it, something started to stir. You weren't ready yet, not by a long shot. But the quiet cave on Tatooine, the life of silence and waiting, it didn't feel like enough anymore. Not when the past was catching up. Not when a little girl with Padme's eyes and a smart mouth looked at you like you were still worth believing in. The moment you realized Anakin was still alive, the world you'd built began to shift beneath your feet. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff you thought you'd escaped, only to see the darkness waiting below. You thought you left that life behind on Mustafar, but now it was chasing you through the neon-lit streets of Daiyu, in the form of the Inquisitors, and the chilling knowledge that Darth Vader breathed the same air you did. You didn't want to believe it, yet every fibre of your being screamed the truth. This was no ghost story, whispered in the quiet corners of the galaxy. This was real. How do you even begin to fight someone like that? Especially when you feel like you've forgotten how to fight at all. That first confrontation with Vader wasn't some grand duel on a battlefield. It was desperate, raw, full of stumbles and near misses. You could feel your breath hitch beneath the mask of calm you'd worked so hard to build. Your reflexes were slower than they used to be, and the Force wasn't the ally it once was. You moved with hesitation, second-guessing every strike and block, as if your body remembered a dance you no longer knew the steps to. Leia watched from the shadows, eyes wide but fierce. She didn't know what to expect from this Ben Yu, the quiet watcher who suddenly became a protector in the harshest way. She asked questions between breaths, questions about the man beneath the robes, the history you tried to keep buried. You tried to answer without falling apart. Sometimes you succeeded, sometimes you didn't. The Inquisitors were relentless. Reva, in particular, seemed to embody the darkness of the Empire, fierce, unforgiving, and terrifyingly close. Each encounter with her was a test of your dwindling strength, forcing you to dig deeper than you thought possible. You'd never seen such ruthless devotion, and it scared you. Not because she was powerful, but because she reminded you of what you could become if you let the fear win. And fear was a constant companion now, not just for you, but for Luke, for Leia, for the fragile hope the galaxy clung to. You started to see your own flaws reflected in the eyes of the children you were trying to protect. You wondered, not for the first time, if you were enough, if the broken man wandering the galaxy could really be the guardian the future needed. But in those darkest moments, when the weight of everything threatened to crush you, something unexpected happened. You caught a glimpse of the old Obi Wan, the Jedi Master, who stood tall even when the galaxy was falling apart. It wasn't a full return, not yet, but it was enough to remind you why you couldn't give up. Leia believed in you, in a way no one else had for a long time, and that belief sparked something you thought was lost forever. You remembered what Qui-Gon always said, that the Force binds all things, connects past, present and future in an endless flow. You realized that even if the past was filled with pain, the future still held promise. It was a promise you had to fight for, no matter how broken you felt. So, you kept fighting. You stumbled, you fell, but you kept rising. Each duel, each narrow escape was a step back toward yourself. A step back to the man who once stood among the stars, who once believed in hope and light. And though the road ahead was uncertain, for the first time in years, you felt a flicker of something you hadn't dared to feel in a long time: hope. Obi-Wan's story is a reminder that even in the darkest places, that weight can become the spark for something new. And sometimes, it takes a little help from an unexpected friend to find the strength again. Speaking of friends, can you imagine trying to explain to Leia that you're a Jedi who's been hiding for 10 years? She might have called you a dusty old hermit right to your face, and honestly, I wouldn't blame her. But sometimes being underestimated is exactly what you need to surprise everyone. This chapter of Obi-Wan's life is a blend of fear, rediscovery, and grit, reminding us all that no matter how far we fall, there's always a chance to rise again, and that even the quietest watcher can become a beacon when the galaxy needs them most. After that first desperate clash with Vader, the fight suddenly feels much bigger than you imagined. Every breath you take weighs heavily, the dust of Tatooine still clinging to your robes, but inside, a spark has ignited, small and flickering, yet fierce enough to pull you back from the edge of silence. Leia. She becomes more than just the child you're sworn to protect. She's a spark herself, a stubborn flame of hope that refuses to be snuffed out. Her sharp tongue, quick wit and fearless spirit surprise you, and somewhere beneath your weathered exterior, you find yourself rooting for her more than you thought possible. Have you ever met someone so determined that they pull you along whether you want to be pulled or not? Leia does that. It's hard not to smile, even when the galaxy feels like it's closing in. Moving through the dark, grimy alleys of Daiyu, slipping between neon lights and shadowed corners, you feel something stirring within you, a quiet stirring that grows louder with every heartbeat. The Force, which once seemed a distant memory, begins to hum again beneath your skin, like a distant melody carried on the wind. Your reflexes sharpen, your senses heighten, and slowly, you find yourself moving with a confidence you thought you lost long ago. It's not the full strength of the Jedi Master you once were, but it's enough to remind you who you still can be. The Inquisitors don't give you a break. Reva, with her fierce eyes and relentless pursuit, forces you to dig deeper than ever before. Then it happens. The moment you've been avoiding, the duel took place on a barren world. It was nothing like the first time. You didn't fight like a man trying to survive. You fought like someone who remembered why he picked up a lightsaber in the first place. Every block, every step, every breath measured, focused. You weren't chasing victory, just clarity. And Vader? He was a storm of anger and strength, but also confusion. He didn't expect you to stand your ground. He didn't expect you to see him, not as the Sith Lord, but as what was left of Anakin. You saw the pain behind the mask, and for a brief moment, maybe he saw it in you too. You broke open his helmet, looked him in the eye, and called him by the name you still remembered. But Anakin didn't answer. Vader did. He told you Anakin was gone, killed by the very man standing in front of you. And that should have hurt more than it did, but strangely, it gave you peace. You weren't holding on to hope for Anakin anymore. You could finally let go. You could finally stop blaming yourself. You didn't kill him. You could have. He was weakened, vulnerable. But what would that have done? The man you cared about was already dead, and the boy he left behind, the one Luke would eventually have to face, was now Vader's burden to carry. You left him there, among the rocks and fire, and walked away not as a fugitive, but as someone who remembered who he was. And Leia? You returned her home, quietly, humbly, without fanfare. When she looked at you one last time, you felt something shift. She didn't see you as just Ben anymore. She knew who you were now, and you knew who she would become. When you returned to Tatooine, the desert felt different, quieter somehow. You rode back to your cave, not in shame but in calm. You approached the Lars homestead, this time not from the shadows. You spoke with Owen, and when he allowed you to meet Luke properly, for just a moment, it felt like the Force nodded at you. And in the stillness, in that moment of peace, you finally heard him. Qui-Gon. He'd been waiting, patiently, watching, and now finally you were ready. So let me ask, have you ever had to lose everything to remember who you are? Have you ever been so far from yourself that only someone else's belief could guide you back? That's what Leia gave Obi Wan. That's what Luke would one day give to someone else. Funny how the smallest voices can wake up the strongest hearts. And hey, considering everything he went through, maybe Obi Wan earned the right to roll his eyes at sand just a little more than the average person. The Jedi Order is no more, scattered like leaves in a harsh storm, and here you are, standing alone beneath the heavy canopy of Dagobah's ancient trees, a place forgotten by time and untouched by the war that tore the galaxy apart. This swamp is a world apart, dense with vines that hang like curtains, waters thick and still, and creatures lurking just beyond sight. It's a refuge, a prison, and a place where the Force hums with a wild, untamed rhythm, far from the polished halls where you once sat among the galaxy's greatest. The air here is thick and damp, clinging to your skin, filling your lungs with the smell of mud and decay. But beneath all that, there's something more. The Force is alive in this place, raw and unpredictable, and it feels like a mirror to the chaos inside you. You've carried so much. Loss, regret, the weight of survival itself. You think about the Jedi you failed to protect, the battles that turned to ash, and the betrayal that left the Order broken and scattered. The question of why you survived when so many did not circles endlessly in your mind like a storm cloud that refuses to pass. Your days here blend into nights as the mists rise and fall, without the steady rhythm of the Republic or the hum of starships to mark time. You spend your hours listening to the creak of ancient trees, the croak of unseen creatures, the quiet whisper of the Force itself. Meditation has become your anchor, a way to calm the restless storm inside. You focus on breath, on balance, trying to hear what the Force is trying to tell you beyond the chaos and the pain. The loneliness is profound. Even for someone as old and wise as you, isolation can weigh heavily. The Force connects everything, but here the connection feels tenuous, stretched thin across the galaxy's darkening sky. You wonder if anyone else remains, hiding as you do, waiting for the right moment to rise again. You reach out quietly, carefully, seeking signs of life, whispers of resistance, faint threads of hope. It's a dangerous game. The Empire hunts Jedi survivors relentlessly, their Inquisitors and Vader himself spreading terror. One false move and the end could come swiftly. The thought of Anakin, once your apprentice and friend, now Darth Vader, claws at your heart. You sense his presence sometimes, a cold shadow looming across the Force. It's a painful reminder of what was lost and what you must confront. You remind yourself that you cannot fight him directly, yet. Your strength is limited, your time will come. For now, survival and patience are your allies. You also think of Luke, hidden away on Tatooine, a boy who carries the promise of the future. Protecting him, guiding him, even from afar, becomes a quiet mission, one that fuels your resolve to endure. The path to him is fraught with danger, but you begin to plan, to prepare for the moment when you can step back into the galaxy and fulfill your true purpose once more. Yoda's exile is a testament to resilience, a reminder that even the greatest warriors must sometimes step back, retreat into the silence to find the strength they need to rise again. The galaxy continues without you for now, but deep in this swamp, the seeds of hope are being sown, slowly, quietly. And yes, even a Jedi Master has his moments of frustration, like when the mud sticks to your boots, or when you accidentally startle a swamp creature that thinks you're a snack. You might mutter a few choice words to yourself in your unique way, reminding you that even in exile, life has its small absurdities. This is just the beginning of Yoda's journey, a story of survival, reflection, and the slow rekindling of hope that refuses to be extinguished. The swamp may be your home, but the galaxy still calls, louder than the croaking frogs or the rustling vines that brush against your robe. You've spent long seasons in silence, training yourself to listen deeper, to trust the Force when words fail. It's a different kind of battle now, one fought in shadows and whispers rather than blaster fire and lightsaber clashes. Yet, every moment here prepares you for the storm ahead, because you know this quiet won't last forever. One day, the Force nudges you, subtle at first, like a breeze stirring the leaves, pulling you back to the wider world. There's unrest growing beyond Dagobah's fog, murmurs of rebellion and hope in dark places, small sparks waiting to catch fire. You sense that your role is not just to hide, but to guide, to train, and to protect the future. That means leaving your refuge, stepping back into the chaos you fled. Easier said than done, right? Have you ever had to face a challenge that felt too big, too overwhelming? That feeling of, maybe I'm too old for this, creeping in? Yoda has been there. You feel the years in your bones, the aches of a long life lived hard, but also the stubborn flame of purpose that refuses to dim. After all, even the smallest creature can have the biggest impact. Just ask a bantha about trying to move quietly in the swamp. Good luck with that. Leaving Dagobah isn't just a physical journey, it's a mental and spiritual one too. You carry memories like weights, wars fought, friends lost, and a galaxy slipping into darkness. But you also carry hope, fragile but real, tied up in the buoy on Tatooine and the flickers of rebellion growing in the outer rim. Your mission is clear, even if the path is uncertain. You begin to reach out through the Force, sensing allies and enemies alike. You find whispers of old friends, risking everything to resist the Empire's grip. You feel the pain of separation, but also the strength of connection, even when you're light years apart. It's a strange kind of comfort, knowing the fight isn't over, that you're not truly alone. Training becomes your new focus, both your own and others. You know the Jedi Order as it was cannot return, but a new hope can grow from the ashes. It won't be easy, it will take time, patience, and sacrifice. The galaxy is broken, but it's not beyond repair. You prepare yourself to guide the next generation, even if that means stepping back into the light you once fled. Still, exile has taught you things no council chamber ever could. You've learned to find peace in the quiet moments, to understand the Force not just as power, but as balance and life itself. You've come to accept that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when to wait, when to listen, and when to act. And yes, even a Jedi Master who's spent years in a swamp can find humor in the little things, like the way a mud crab looks at you, like you're trespassing, or how the thick mist can turn your vision into a blurry mess, making even a wise old Yoda stumble over a root or two. After all, wisdom doesn't always come with grace. You also feel the weight of your responsibility like never before. The Empire's shadow spreads, dark and suffocating, crushing hope wherever it reaches. Darth Vader still hunts the remnants of the Jedi with relentless fury, a constant reminder of what was lost and what still must be stopped. That knowledge sharpens your focus. There's no time for doubt or hesitation. The galaxy is waiting, and you're no longer just a hermit in a swamp. You're a quiet warrior, preparing to rejoin the fight. The road ahead will be perilous, filled with loss and sacrifice, but also with moments of triumph and hope. Your journey is far from over. So here you are, stepping into the shoes of Ashoka Tano. The Jedi are being hunted, scattered like leaves in a storm, and you're somewhere in the middle of it all. No longer a Jedi, no longer sure who you are. You remember that she left the Order not long before the fall, but the galaxy still feels like it's closing in fast. It's chaotic, dangerous, and yet you're moving forward, not knowing exactly what comes next. You've got your 2 white lightsabers, worn from battle and loss, but you're not just relying on them. You're relying on your instincts, your quick thinking, and the lessons you learned from Anakin, Obi Wan, and even your own hard-earned experiences. You're out here on your own. No Jedi Council to back you up. No big order to lean on. Just you and the Force in a galaxy that's trying to swallow you whole. The Clone Wars are over, but the fight feels far from done. You move quietly, slipping through the shadows of a galaxy now ruled by the Empire, watching as friends disappear and new enemies take their place. Trust is hard to come by, and you learn quickly that the people you used to call allies might be your biggest threat now. It's a lonely road, but you're stubborn, and that helps. Have you ever been in a place where you felt like everything you believed in was changing beneath your feet? That's the kind of feeling Ahsoka knows well right now. But she's not the type to give up or hide forever. Instead, she makes choices, sometimes risky ones, driven by a stubborn hope that there's still good left to fight for, even if the galaxy won't call it Jedi anymore. You come across groups resisting the Empire's tightening grip, scrappy fighters who haven't given up. They don't have fancy titles or big armies, just guts and the will to stand against oppression. And sometimes you join them. Your journey takes you to planets far and wide, from the dusty streets of Coruscant to the hidden rebel cells scattered in the Outer Rim. Every step is a lesson, every encounter a test. You learn that surviving isn't just about fighting. It's about knowing when to listen, when to vanish, and when to strike. It's about adapting to a galaxy that's no longer black and white. And yeah, sometimes things get weird, like when a small droid decides you're its new best friend, or when you have to explain to someone why your lightsabers are, well, different. You might even catch yourself wondering if you left your second lightsaber somewhere in a cantina after a long night of running. Happens to the best of us. But beneath all that, there's something steady, something that keeps you moving forward. It's not the Jedi Code or the Order's rules, or even the Force as it was taught. It's something more personal, more real. It's your own sense of right and wrong, your own determination to do what's necessary, no matter the cost. So as you walk in Ahsoka's footsteps, what do you think you'd do? Would you fight quietly from the shadows, or try to rally the rebels and lead the charge? Maybe a little of both, because surviving in this new galaxy isn't about choosing sides. It's about carving your own path, even when the way isn't clear. The galaxy is no longer the place you once knew. The Empire rules with an iron fist, and the people who used to stand beside you are either gone or hiding. You're alone, but not quite defeated. You begin moving through the galaxy differently. The grand battles and wide-open battlefields have been replaced by narrow alleyways, cramped rebel safe houses, and quick escapes through crowded spaceports. There are no official missions anymore, no Jedi Council to give orders or approve plans. Instead, it's a matter of instinct, trust in a handful of people who still believe in something better, and the relentless drive to protect those who can't protect themselves. The rebel cells you find aren't like the Jedi you grew up with. They don't have the Force or lightsabers, but they've got determination and grit, and that counts for a lot. You learn their ways, pick up new skills, and start to understand that the fight isn't always about power. It's about people, about ideas, about the little sparks that can ignite something much bigger. You start to realize that your place isn't just to fight alone in the shadows, but to be part of a bigger movement, even if it's messy and uncertain. Of course, blending in isn't easy. Imagine trying to slip through a crowded market while carrying two glowing white lightsabers. Yeah, that's a good way to attract attention. So you get creative. You ditch the robes, pick up less conspicuous clothes, and learn to move with the flow of the crowd. Sometimes you even have to laugh at yourself when a local vendor tries to sell you something you clearly don't need, or when you realize you've been followed by an overly curious kid who thinks you're some kind of space superhero. It's those little moments that remind you life still has room for normal, even when everything else is falling apart. The Force still flows through you, but it feels different now. The old Jedi teachings about strict codes and rituals don't fit anymore. You're learning to trust the Force in a more personal way, listening to it in quiet moments, feeling it in the connections you make with others, and letting it guide you without trying to control everything. It's a balance that's hard to find but necessary if you want to survive and keep fighting on your own terms. Your path isn't without danger. The Empire's forces are everywhere, and you know Darth Vader is out there hunting what's left of the Jedi. Every encounter with an Imperial patrol, every narrow escape from Inquisitors reminds you how high the stakes are. But you're getting smarter, faster, and more cautious. The galaxy might be dark, but you're finding ways to shine in small but meaningful ways. And even with all this tension, there are moments of laughter and camaraderie. Maybe it's sharing a meal with rebels around a campfire on a remote moon, or swapping stories about past adventures that sound almost too crazy to be true. You might joke about how you used to get scolded by Anakin for being too reckless, or laugh at how often you forget where you left your lightsabers. Those moments keep you human and remind you why the fight matters beyond just survival. Just imagine, if you had to keep going after losing everything you believed in, how would you hold on to hope? What would keep you moving forward when the future feels uncertain? The galaxy may have changed, but the fight for freedom hasn't ended. And as you walk with Ahsoka, you begin to see that sometimes the most powerful thing isn't a lightsaber or the Force, it's the choice to keep going when giving up seems easier. You're standing with her as she steps away from the old Jedi identity, even though it shaped so much of who she is. It's a complicated feeling, kind of like having to take off a favourite jacket because it's worn and tattered, but knowing you'll never really be the same without it. Ahsoka's no stranger to tough choices. Leaving the Jedi Order before the fall gave her a taste of what it means to walk a different path, and now she's applying those lessons in the harshest way possible. The galaxy has shifted, and so must she. You watch her make decisions based on her own values, her own sense of justice, rather than any council's decree. That's not easy, especially when you're constantly reminded of what's been lost. Survival alone doesn't cut it anymore. Ahsoka knows the fight against the Empire is bigger than any one person. She finds herself drawn to others who refuse to bow down, to those who believe in a future where freedom isn't just a word but something real. And slowly, she starts to build something of her own. Not an order, not a title, but a connection, a cause. Think about what that means. You've lost a big part of yourself, yet you still have enough fire to stand up and keep going. You don't have all the answers, and that's okay. Her relationship with the Force changes too. She trusts her instincts, learns from mistakes, and grows into someone who defines the Force on her own terms. That's a powerful idea, finding your own way even when the world wants to box you in. And while Ahsoka's journey is serious, it's not without its lighter moments. You can imagine her smirking when someone underestimates her because she's not wearing the Jedi robes anymore, or chuckling quietly when a mission goes sideways in an unexpected way. Those small touches remind you she's still human, still the same person, with a sharp wit and a strong will. At some point, you wonder what it must feel like to carry so much history, so much pain, and still choose to fight for hope. How do you keep your spirit intact when everything around you is breaking? That question doesn't have a simple answer, but watching Ahsoka, you realize it's about resilience, about holding on to the belief that things can get better, no matter how dark it seems. Her story leads to new alliances, new battles, and a growing sense that maybe, just maybe, the galaxy isn't as lost as it feels. She becomes a symbol of that possibility, a reminder that even after great loss, you can find strength and purpose again. Imagine you're a Force-sensitive kid. The Jedi are gone, the Empire is rising, and the word Jedi is something people barely whisper anymore. Maybe you've always been a little different, though you never understood why. Maybe your emotions are louder than those around you, or sometimes things around you move when you don't want them to. You don't have a name for it yet, but you feel it, something inside you that's hard to explain. In a time when the Empire has declared all Jedi enemies of the state, being Force-sensitive isn't a gift anymore. It's a risk. A secret you hide from your friends, your neighbours, even your own family, because if anyone found out, it could mean death. You grow up learning early how to cover up the things you can't control, learning to swallow fear like it's just another part of everyday life. Your parents are watching you carefully too, worried about every small slip. Some of them try to move as far away as possible from the centres of power, taking you to quiet backwater planets where the Empire's eyes don't always reach. Others live in constant fear, knowing that the Empire's Inquisitors patrol the galaxy, looking for kids just like you, hoping to root you out before you become a threat. You're always watching over your shoulder, always wondering if today's the day someone shows up at your door with blasters drawn. And that's terrifying because you're just a kid, learning how to ride a speeder, dreaming about flying, maybe wanting to be a pilot or a mechanic, not a hunted fugitive. You quickly learn the hard way that people aren't as kind as you'd hope. In small towns and colonies, rumours spread fast, and neighbours look for reasons to report someone strange or different. A forceful glance, a strange coincidence, or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time can put you in danger. You might be the kid who once moved a rock with your mind, but now you're someone others avoid, someone whispered about. And the Empire doesn't have patience for mistakes. The Inquisitors are trained hunters, and once they set their sights on a child, there's no easy escape. Some kids disappear, never to be seen again. Others get dragged into dark places, where their powers are exploited and twisted, trained to serve the Empire's cause instead of resisting it. But not every story ends in capture or loss. Some kids find allies in the most unexpected places. Rebels who risk their lives to protect those children. Old soldiers who remember a time before the Empire, or other Force users who've managed to stay hidden. These moments aren't grand rescues or sweeping victories. They're quiet, small acts of kindness, teaching a child how to meditate without fear, helping them to control their abilities just enough to stay safe, or simply listening when no one else will. It's a lonely path, filled with uncertainty. You grow up fast because childhood is a luxury you can't always afford. Every day is a balance between hiding who you are and learning enough to survive. Sometimes that means running from your own powers or pretending they don't exist. Other times it means trusting someone just enough to let them teach you a secret. If you think about it, it's like being dropped into a vast wilderness without a compass, trying to find your way home when you're not even sure where home is anymore. You carry this secret weight, a power that could change everything or could get you killed, and you learn that the safest thing might be to stay quiet, to keep your head down, and hope the galaxy forgets you exist. The question that hangs over all of this is simple but heavy. How do you grow up when your whole identity is tied to a power the galaxy has declared dead or dangerous? How do you make sense of the Force when there's no one left to teach you? Some of these kids never find the answers, but others keep searching. They learn from whispers, from scraps of stories, from the rare person who still believes in what the Jedi stood for. And here's a thought. What happens to all those kids now? Some are probably adults by this point, trying to live normal lives while feeling something inside that won't quite go away. Some might have turned away from their powers entirely, choosing survival over everything else. And some? They might be waiting for a chance to stand up, to fight back, to be more than what the Empire thinks they are. So, as you imagine stepping into their shoes, you see a world that's rough, unpredictable, and full of danger, but also full of quiet hope, because these kids carry something precious, something that might just change the galaxy again, in time. The truth is, many of these kids grew up learning to hide parts of themselves. They might have been the ones who could sense danger before it arrived, or move small objects when no one was looking. But the moment someone noticed, or worse, reported them, everything could change. They might have been dragged away in the night, never to be seen again, or forced into situations that no child should ever face. Families went to extreme lengths to protect these kids. Some gave up everything they had, moving from planet to planet, taking odd jobs in places so remote, even the Empire's watchful eye was tired. Imagine being a child on those journeys, constantly on edge, never really having a home or a place to feel safe. You're learning to control abilities that don't come naturally, but you're also learning how to disappear, to pretend to be someone you're not. For many, survival wasn't just about avoiding the Empire, it was about figuring out who they could trust. Because trust was rare, even in families. Sometimes fear won out, and kids were sent away or kept in the dark for their own safety. In some cases, Force-sensitive kids were hidden, raised to believe their powers were curses or mistakes, things to be denied or suppressed. But here's the thing, the Force doesn't just switch off because the Jedi are gone. It's a part of these kids, whether they wanted it or not. And as much as they might have tried to bury it, that connection stayed alive, flickering beneath the surface like a secret they couldn't fully escape. Some of these kids never saw a lightsaber until they were adults. They didn't grow up swinging one or sparring with others. Instead, they learned through whispers, by watching the stars, or listening to stories passed down by people who remembered the Jedi days. A few even stumbled into their powers by accident, accidental telekinesis in moments of fear, or sudden flashes of insight when they needed it most. It wasn't all doom and gloom, though. In some places, small pockets of resistance existed. Rebels who'd heard about these children and quietly did what they could to protect them. Maybe a local rebel cell hid a Force-sensitive kid in their ranks, or an old ally of the Jedi slipped in secret lessons when no one was watching. Those moments were rare, but they meant the difference between hiding forever and having a chance to grow into something more. And while we often think of the Empire as this unstoppable force, even they weren't perfect at hunting down every last one. The galaxy is huge, filled with planets nobody cares about and places the Empire can't reach easily. So many of these kids grew up on the fringes, learning to survive not just the Empire, but the loneliness of feeling like they didn't quite belong anywhere. Now, imagine being one of these kids, walking through markets where no one suspects a thing, trying to live a normal life while carrying a secret that could get you killed. You learn early to keep your feelings in check, to control sudden bursts of power, and most importantly, to never trust anyone who might turn you in. It's a lonely existence, but it's also a story of quiet resilience, where survival itself is an act of rebellion. Sometimes you get glimpses of hope. Maybe you meet someone who's also Force-sensitive, or find a dusty old holocron buried away on a forgotten moon. Those little pieces connect you to a past you barely understand, but want to hold on to anyway. They remind you that even if the Jedi Order is gone, something of it still lives on, in you and others like you. And here's a thought to leave you with. How would you handle that kind of life? Growing up, always looking over your shoulder, hiding your true self, but feeling something powerful inside that you don't fully understand. It's a lot to carry, but these kids, these hidden survivors, show us that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on battlefields. They're fought quietly inside us every single day. You're living through the Clone Wars, the galaxy is chaotic, everything feels unstable, planets are switching sides, entire systems are at war, and people are exhausted. The Republic's fighting a war it didn't see coming, led by Jedi who are supposed to be peacekeepers, not generals. There's fear in the air. That's the setting. And now picture this. Amid all that noise, Chancellor Palpatine keeps gaining more emergency power. Not all at once, not overnight, but step by step. People don't really notice, or they do, but they don't say much because everything feels temporary. The logic is always the same. We need this to win the war. Or, it's just for now. But just for now stretches on for years. He stays in office way longer than anyone expected, and by the time some senators raise concerns, the damage is already done. It's not that the galaxy voted to become an empire. Nobody walked into a booth and picked tyranny on a ballot, but slowly, things started to shift. Rights were suspended, just until the war's over. The Jedi were sent to more and more battles, while Palpatine quietly consolidated control. And the people? Most of them were tired. They didn't want more speeches, more debates, or more uncertainty. They wanted peace, security, someone who sounded like they had a plan. That's how it started. Not with a giant red flag waving across Coruscant, but with slow, careful decisions made behind closed doors. There were warnings, sure, Bail Organa, Mon Mothma, Padme Amidala. They all saw where it was going, but by then public opinion had already shifted. A lot of people didn't trust the Jedi anymore. They were seen as secretive, disconnected, or even dangerous. Some believed the Jedi had too much influence. Others thought they were the reason the war dragged on. The Jedi, once the symbols of honor and balance, were wiped out in a single move, executed across the galaxy by the clone army that once fought beside them. You'd think people would have reacted more strongly, right? But here's the thing. Many didn't know the full story. They were told the Jedi betrayed the Republic, that they tried to overthrow the government, and since most folks had never even seen a Jedi, they didn't question it much. You see, the war had worn people down. When Palpatine announced the formation of the Galactic Empire, standing in front of the Senate with that calm voice and confident presence, a lot of beings across the galaxy actually applauded. To them, it sounded like the war was finally over. The Republic had been messy, bloated, corrupt, so maybe a new system could work. Maybe a little order wasn't such a bad thing. That was the mood. If you lived on a core world like Coruscant, it probably didn't feel like a dictatorship right away. Things ran on schedule, there were fewer riots, and the trains still showed up on time. People went to work, fed their families, watched the holonet. It felt like things were improving, finally stabilizing. The idea of an empire didn't scare them because they didn't think it would affect their day-to-day life. Meanwhile, on Outer Rim worlds, the changes hit harder. Stormtroopers started replacing clone troopers. Gangs were replaced by governors. Suddenly there were curfews, inspections, more patrols, and a lot fewer questions being asked. But again, people didn't rise up all at once. Many were already used to being neglected or stepped on, so it just felt like more of the same, but with shinier uniforms. That's how it spread. Quietly. The rebels? They were still years away from organizing. At this point, they were just whispers, old senators passing notes to each other, pilots doing side jobs, families hiding things in basements. So now ask yourself, if you were there, if you were just a worker in a factory on Corellia or a farmer on Lothal, would you have spoken up? Or would you have told yourself that things were better than before, that someone else would deal with it, that as long as your street stayed quiet, it wasn't your problem? The galaxy didn't flip overnight, it drifted, and most people were too busy surviving to notice just how far it had already gone. The Empire rises, but on the surface, not much really changes overnight. Same job, same people, same problems. Except now the logos look different, and there are way more stormtroopers in the streets. That's what made it so easy to accept. Palpatine didn't show up waving a flag and declaring dictatorship. He talked about peace, rebuilding, ending corruption, things most people were too tired to argue with. He knew people were desperate for some kind of normal again, and he gave them that, just with a new badge on it. Most citizens weren't sitting around plotting rebellion. They were trying to keep their homes, feed their families, and not get noticed. And honestly, for the average person, life didn't seem that bad at first. In some places, infrastructure improved, crime went down, and trade routes ran more efficiently. If anything, it looked like things were finally getting organized. But underneath that sense of order, the screws were already tightening. The Empire started nationalizing industries, controlling information, regulating travel between systems. If you weren't paying attention, you might not notice. But if you pushed back, even just a little, you'd feel it fast. A neighbor who spoke out disappeared. A town that resisted new laws got a permanent stormtrooper outpost. And slowly, people stopped asking questions. The Jedi was still the scapegoat. For years, the official story was that they betrayed the Republic. The HoloNet kept repeating it. Interviews with clone officers, so-called eyewitnesses, carefully edited footage. If you didn't know any better, and most didn't, it sounded legit. The Empire didn't need to silence everyone, just enough to control the story. And in a galaxy that big, it didn't take much to drown out the truth. Meanwhile, those who remembered the Jedi for who they really were either went into hiding or just kept quiet. There were no public trials, no real investigations, just a clean sweep. The Jedi Temple on Coruscant got repurposed into an imperial building, and people were told to move on. That's the wild part, how quickly people did. Even planets that once had strong Jedi ties went silent. Governors were installed, local leaders who didn't play along were replaced, and stormtroopers became a regular sight. Some folks complained in private, but out loud, not worth the risk. It's not that people became heartless, they just learned to keep their heads down. You'd be surprised how quickly survival starts to look like loyalty, when the alternative is prison, or worse. And here's the thing, people adapt. If you grow up in a world where the Empire's always been around, you don't see it as something new or oppressive. It's just the system. A kid born 5 years after the Clone Wars might never hear the word Republic, except in old books. They'd grow up saluting stormtroopers, thinking Palpatine was a wise and strong leader, and never really know what was taken from them. That generational shift was part of the plan. The Empire didn't just want control, it wanted memory to fade. Old senators who disagreed were either pushed out or forced to play along. Resistance leaders were treated like criminals or terrorists. Even teachers started changing the curriculum. History was rewritten, while people were too distracted trying to survive to notice. Meanwhile, the seeds of rebellion were starting to form, but they were scattered, uncoordinated. Bail Organa on Alderaan, Mon Mothma playing the long game from inside the Senate, Saw Gerrera already taking a more aggressive path, but none of it looked like a proper rebellion yet. Just sparks, isolated, fragile, and easily snuffed out. So if you were living through this, what would you do? Would you speak up? Would you risk everything to send a message? Or would you tell yourself you've got a family to protect, a business to run, and that maybe staying quiet a little longer isn't so bad? The Empire didn't crush the galaxy with one big hammer. It wore people down, slowly, quietly. And most of them, they let it happen because it was easier to hope someone else would fix it. So by this point, the Empire looks unshakable. Stormtroopers on every major planet, the Senate mostly quiet, people adapting to the new normal like it's been around forever. But the thing about control is, it doesn't last forever when it's built on fear. And slowly, bit by bit, the cracks started showing. Not all at once, and definitely not in a way that made Palpatine sweat at night, but people were watching. People who had lived through the Clone Wars and still remembered how things were before the Emperor. People who saw how power was being used and didn't like where it was heading. The weird part? Most of them weren't warriors or Jedi or big-shot leaders. They were regular citizens who had enough. It usually started small. A factory owner who decided not to sell out to Imperial contracts. A pilot who altered cargo records to help smugglers sneak supplies to isolated colonies. A senator who started asking quiet questions in the halls of Coruscant instead of on the Senate floor. These weren't grand gestures. They were small acts, easy to miss, but enough to make a ripple. And eventually, those ripples found each other. You had Bail Organa on Alderaan, still playing the political game, but using his influence to build something under the radar. Then there was Mon Mothma, trying to hold things together from inside the Senate, constantly walking that line between resistance and survival. And Saw Gerrera, he wasn't subtle. He didn't care about politics. He was already fighting, already blowing things up, already burning every bridge that slowed him down. But they all had one thing in common. They knew the Empire wasn't invincible. It looked solid, sure, but it was built on the idea that no one would ever push back. Once people started realizing they weren't alone in their frustration, the fear started to shift. People still kept quiet in public, still nodded along when the Empire spoke, but in private, they were connecting dots. Some rebel cells popped up and vanished just as fast. Others lasted longer, building networks through old separatist routes, abandoned Republic listening posts, or remote planets the Empire hadn't gotten around to locking down yet. There wasn't one big rebellion at this stage, more like dozens of tiny sparks, each flickering in the dark, trying not to get stomped out. Meanwhile, the Empire didn't sit back and ignore it. They stepped things up. Propaganda got heavier, travel restrictions got tighter, local governors started using harsher punishments. You didn't just get fined for breaking curfew, you disappeared. Entire villages were relocated if someone whispered the word resistance. And if there was even a rumor that someone had helped a Jedi or a rebel cell, that was enough to bring in Inquisitors or worse. But that fear started to backfire in some places. Because once you've got nothing left to lose, fighting starts to look like the better option. You had young pilots joining up with smugglers, mechanics turning freighters into makeshift bombers, droids being reprogrammed to help monitor Imperial patrols. Even former clone troopers, some of them realized what they'd been used for and quietly broke away. You won't hear their stories on the holonet, but they were out there, doing what they could. And then there's the average person, right? The one who still wakes up, goes to work, keeps their head down. Most of them aren't rebels, they're just surviving. But even those people started noticing something strange. Whispers spreading faster, a stormtrooper gone missing, a transmission that cuts through the usual propaganda with something that actually feels real. Nobody says it out loud, but it's enough to make you pause, enough to make you wonder, is something happening? And that's how it spreads. Not through big speeches or lightning bolts, but through curiosity, quiet conversations, a growing sense that maybe, just maybe, this Empire isn't as untouchable as it looks. You know what's funny? The Empire never really feared the Jedi. They feared ideas, people thinking for themselves. That's why the rebellion was so dangerous to them. So even though the Senate was still technically in place, and Coruscant still looked clean and organized, there was a shift in the air. You could feel it. Something building. It wasn't ready to explode yet, but it was coming. 100 tiny frustrations becoming one loud voice. And maybe the Empire was strong, but it was starting to learn the hard way. Fear doesn't last forever. For thousands of years it stood tall, right in the center of the Republic's capital, watching over the city from the highest point on the skyline. Now, it looked the same, But something felt off, like the soul of it had been pulled out. After the purge, Palpatine didn't waste time. The moment the Jedi were branded traitors, the temple was sealed off, clone troopers locked it down, and access was restricted to Imperial personnel only. Civilians weren't allowed near it anymore, and most didn't try. People moved on fast, or at least pretended to. You can imagine how strange that was, seeing a place that once symbolized peace suddenly treated like a military base. Same building, same statues, same steps, but now guarded by soldiers with blasters and no interest in peace. Palpatine didn't destroy the temple. He didn't need to. He repurposed it. The public didn't get a clear answer on what exactly it was turned into. Officially, it was said to be under Imperial evaluation, whatever that meant. But those who paid attention knew something else was going on. Rumors started floating around. Some said it became a palace for Palpatine himself. Others thought it housed a secret academy to train dark side followers. And then there were the stories that said the Emperor spent time deep inside, meditating in places where Jedi once trained. The truth's somewhere in the middle. The temple was turned into an Imperial facility. Quiet, secretive, locked away. Palpatine used it as a base for dark side research, and he didn't do it alone. The Inquisitors, his hand-picked Jedi hunters, used parts of the temple for their own training and operations. You probably never saw it on the HoloNet, but some of the most brutal interrogations and indoctrination efforts were carried out right where young Jedi used to study lightsaber forms. One of the most twisted parts is how little was changed structurally. The towers, the statues, the archives, most of it was kept intact, but the meaning was stripped away. The Jedi symbols were taken down, replaced with Imperial insignias. The library was no longer a place of knowledge, it was a vault for Sith artifacts and restricted materials. What used to be a council chamber became a meeting space for dark side agents. The temple was hollowed out, not physically, but in what it represented. And yet, outside those walls, life on Coruscant didn't stop. The markets still opened every morning. Speeder traffic kept flowing. Politicians still debated in the Senate. Most people didn't talk about the temple anymore, maybe out of fear, maybe because pretending it was never there was easier than dealing with what it had become. It's strange, right? How quickly people can get used to something disappearing, even when it's sitting right in front of them. If you were someone who lived on Coruscant during the Clone Wars, you'd probably pass the temple every day on your way to work or home. Maybe you used to point it out to your kids, tell them stories about the Jedi, maybe even dream of seeing a lightsaber up close. After the purge, all that faded. You'd lower your voice when walking by. You'd avoid looking too long. Some even taught their kids to forget it was ever important. There's something eerie about that level of silence, like a piece of history was being erased, not by removing it, but by making it invisible. And you could argue that worked better than blowing it up, because when something explodes, people talk. But when something's still standing, slowly forgotten, people stop caring. And while the temple was sealed to the public, the underground levels, those went even deeper. Literally, most civilians didn't even know they existed. But below the structure, in ancient chambers that predated even the modern Jedi Order, the Emperor was doing something else entirely. He wasn't just using the building for intimidation, he was exploring the dark side, quietly, patiently. Some believed he tapped into secrets buried beneath the temple, old Force nexuses that made the place special to begin with. The Jedi had built their home there for a reason, and Palpatine knew that. Books, holocrons, and ancient archives were scattered, stolen, or destroyed. Places that once served as hubs for Jedi training, temples, libraries, hidden enclaves, were either abandoned or repurposed by the Empire. For someone who loved the Order, it felt like watching your entire childhood library burn to ash, not knowing if any of it would ever be rebuilt. But the story didn't end with destruction. Some Jedi, those who survived, became secret keepers of the knowledge. They hid holocrons, tiny data crystals containing centuries of teachings in the far reaches of the galaxy. Some passed their skills quietly to Force-sensitive children, teaching them to survive and keep the flame alive without drawing attention. These lessons weren't easy to come by. There was constant fear of discovery by Imperial forces or Inquisitors. You might wonder, how did Jedi culture survive without its central hub? Well, it spread out and fragmented. Instead of formal training at grand temples, It became a collection of whispered lessons and hidden techniques. Without a unified order, many of those teachings were lost or diluted, but the core ideas endured. It's like a family recipe passed down by word of mouth, changing slightly with each generation, but still recognizable. At the same time, the Empire worked hard to erase Jedi influence. They rewrote histories, labeled the Jedi as traitors, and promoted the Sith and Imperial ideology instead. So if you were a Force-sensitive kid growing up during the early Empire years, chances are you didn't hear stories of Jedi heroism. Instead, you got the official version, which made Jedi seem like enemies of peace. Despite that, pockets of Force users held on to their traditions. Some followed older, lesser-known philosophies that predated the Jedi or stood apart from the Jedi-Sith conflict. Others created their own paths, blending teachings with survival instincts. It was messy and unorganized, but it kept the idea of the Force alive. You might be thinking, so where does that leave us? Did the Jedi just become myths overnight? Not exactly. Stories travel, especially in a galaxy as vast as this one. Smugglers, traders, and even stormtroopers shared rumors and legends. The Jedi became symbols, sometimes idealized, sometimes feared, but always present in the background. That cultural footprint was important because it kept hope flickering for those who believed the Jedi might one day return. And what about the holocrons, those little data sticks containing Jedi wisdom? Some survived, hidden on remote planets, or locked away in secret vaults. A few made their way into the hands of smugglers, collectors, or even bounty hunters who didn't fully understand their value. The pieces were scattered like puzzle bits, waiting to be put back together. You can almost imagine a young Force-sensitive person growing up in the Outer Rim, stumbling upon a dusty holocron, or hearing an old story from a retired Jedi or exile. That moment might spark a journey, one that eventually leads back to rediscovering the lost Jedi culture. It's kind of poetic, don't you think? How something so vast can be reduced to a few treasured fragments, yet still inspire a whole new generation. If you try to picture what that felt like, imagine being part of a secret club, where most of the members are gone, and the rest are spread thin across the galaxy, hiding, always watching over their shoulder. There was no central training temple anymore, no big gatherings, just small pockets of people trying to hold on to what mattered. For those who managed to keep some Jedi teachings alive, life was complicated. The traditions were hard to pass down without the usual structure. Jedi philosophy wasn't just about lightsabers and Force powers, it was about discipline, self-reflection, balance. Teaching that over a campfire, or in a cramped basement on some remote planet, was a far cry from the grand halls of the Jedi Temple. You'd have to adapt, sometimes improvise. Imagine trying to learn something as vast as the Force without your usual guides, without a formal curriculum, just a handful of lessons handed down by someone who might themselves be barely holding it together. A lot of Force-sensitive kids growing up during the Empire had no idea what the Jedi truly were. To many, Jedi were almost legends, stories told in hushed tones, like fairy tales with a dark edge. If you stumbled across someone who claimed to know Jedi ways, your first thought might be, is this person trustworthy or a fanatic? In a world ruled by the Empire, trust was hard to come by, especially when it came to anything connected to the Old Order. That's why many survivors became wanderers, or secret teachers who moved constantly. Staying in one place too long was dangerous. You might attract attention, and the Empire was always on the lookout for anything remotely linked to Jedi. The Inquisitors had the job of sniffing out Force users, and they weren't exactly known for being gentle. You had to be quick, careful, and sometimes make tough choices about who to trust or what to teach. Interestingly, because the Jedi teachings spread unevenly, you see some variations develop. Different groups emphasized different aspects of the Force, or adapted lessons to their own experiences and environments. Some became more pragmatic, focusing on survival and stealth rather than the grand ideals of peacekeeping. Others clung to the old ways, hoping for a chance to rebuild properly someday. This fractured passing on of knowledge meant that the Jedi culture became less uniform and more diverse, which probably saved it from disappearing entirely. I bet you're wondering if any of those teachings made it back to the public eye before the original order was re-established. The answer is yes, but it was slow and subtle. There were individuals who rose up quietly, like Obi Wan Kenobi or Yoda, who held the last threads and helped keep those traditions alive. Then there were the stories passed down among those who believed in the Force, even if they weren't Jedi themselves. Smugglers, bounty hunters, or even ordinary citizens might have heard bits and pieces of these stories and carried them forward. One of the more surprising things is how some Jedi knowledge ended up influencing unexpected places. The Force isn't just about lightsabers and battles. It touches everything from healing to meditation, from diplomacy to strategy. Certain techniques or philosophies found their way into other groups or even local customs on distant planets. So, while the Empire was busy rewriting history, bits of Jedi culture leaked out like underground streams, flowing quietly through the galaxy. Of course, not everything survived intact. Many holocrons were lost or destroyed, and some teachings were forgotten or misunderstood. That's just the reality of losing such a vast tradition all at once. And yet, for those who cared, the challenge became how to rebuild from fragments, how to revive what was broken without being crushed again. Imagine being someone in that position, holding a cracked holocron or trying to remember lessons learned decades ago, wondering if you'd ever see the Jedi rise again. It's a heavy burden, but also a hopeful one, because as much as the Empire tried to crush the Jedi spirit, those scattered survivors showed that you can't erase everything. Culture, knowledge, and hope have a way of sticking around, even when things look bleak. So if you're sitting there thinking about what it really meant to be a Jedi after Order 66, it wasn't about grand battles or dramatic speeches. It was about quiet survival, passing on a flame in secret, and holding on to a way of life that wants to find the galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the real story begins. When Order 66 hit, everything collapsed in seconds. The same soldiers you'd trusted turned around and fired without hesitation. A lot of Jedi never even got a chance to figure out what happened. They were taken out mid-sentence, mid-step, mid-thought. If you were lucky enough to survive, the galaxy didn't give you much room to breathe. You had to move fast, disappear, start thinking like someone who didn't exist anymore. The usual way of doing things was gone. You weren't on the front lines anymore. You weren't part of something bigger. You were on your own. And if you didn't figure that out quickly, you didn't last long. If you were a Jedi, your whole life changed. You weren't a hero anymore. You were a target. There was no more temple, no more Jedi Council, no more structured missions or support. You had to vanish, change your name, bury your lightsaber deep underground, and hope no one asked questions. Some Jedi went off-grid entirely, lived in quiet villages, pretended to be farmers or travelers. Some couldn't handle the shift and gave up the code altogether. Others kept fighting in their own way, even if it meant staying in the shadows. The Force didn't go anywhere, but using it became dangerous. Even small things, moving something with your mind, sensing someone's emotions too well, reacting too fast, could expose you. And if that happened, it wasn't just stormtroopers you had to worry about. Inquisitors were trained to hunt Jedi specifically. If they got wind of your location, your chances of walking away dropped fast. A few Jedi tried to keep their purpose alive, even if quietly. They helped people on the fringes, protected the innocent when they could, taught a few others in secret, but even those small actions came with risk. The Empire had ears everywhere. One wrong word, one slip-up, and your entire cover could fall apart. And then there were the kids. New Force-sensitive children were still being born, even after the Purge. But now, they had no temple, masters, and training. A lot of them didn't even know what the Force was. Their powers showed up by accident, during moments of fear or anger or just confusion, and without guidance, that could be dangerous. Some ended up hiding it, others were caught. A few were recruited by the Empire, turned into tools instead of protectors. The Jedi teachings didn't disappear completely, but they were scattered. Some holocrons were saved. A few old masters like Yoda and Obi Wan held on to what they could. A small number of survivors shared what they remembered with people they trusted. It wasn't enough to restart the Order, but it was enough to keep the spark alive. That quiet effort to preserve knowledge, even if it was just in scraps, ended up making a difference later. But let's be honest, it wasn't noble or elegant, it was messy. A lot of fear, a lot of mistakes. Some Jedi turned bitter, some lost faith in the code or in themselves. The galaxy moved on quickly. Most people were too busy surviving under the Empire to worry about the Jedi. The propaganda worked. The Jedi became villains in the eyes of many, accused of betrayal, blamed for the war. That made things even harder for anyone still trying to do good. Still, through all of that, some Jedi refused to let go completely. They didn't have a council chamber or shiny robes anymore, but they had the memory of what the Jedi stood for, even if it was flawed, and that was enough to keep them moving. Quietly, patiently, hoping that maybe someday the galaxy would be ready to remember again. When Luke came into the picture, he didn't find a functioning Jedi Order waiting for him. What he found were echoes, stories, survivors, fragments. That's all that was left. But those fragments added up. They gave him something to build on, not to copy the old Jedi way exactly, but to create something new. And even though the path was different, the core values were still there. So what does all this really say about all of this? They lost almost everything, but they didn't fully disappear. They adapted, struggled, fell, got back up again. It wasn't a clean story, and it definitely wasn't full of big victories. But somehow, through fear, through exile, through failure, they endured. And that's probably the most honest thing about the Jedi legacy. It was never perfect, but it survived in the cracks, in the margins, in the people who couldn't fully walk away from what they believed. And because of that, it had a chance to come back.